channel. Get started. I was actually playing around with two-factor authentication. How many people know what I'm talking about? Since we were talking about computer security, signing in, and stuff like that. We'll start today with that particular note because it was one of the topics in Chapter 3, and I think the book had a reasonable treatment of that subject matter. But I think that's also one of the more kind of important topics for today. Well, not today, but in recent years, it has become more and more of an issue. All right, so we'll start with security software and also stuff that are related to security. Yeah, go ahead.
The row sheet.
Row sheet. I just stapled it, so I know I have it.
I know, I saw you stapling it. Nope.
It would be nice if I can just use my camera on the phone and just do a little scan here and leave it up to Picasa to recognize each face and automatically check the sign-in sheet for me. That's going to happen. Okay, Picasa already has facial recognition, so you can basically give it a picture and say this is grandma. Give it another picture and say this is also grandma, and then give it another picture, this is also grandma, and it can generalize from all those pictures, who is grandma. So now when you upload all your family get-together pictures, then you can ask Picasa, locate all pictures with grandma in it. And it will go through the pictures and automatically recognize, oh, grandma is in this picture, grandma is also in that picture, and so on.
It's scary.
It is scary, but it's happening. The thing is, it is happening.
The government has had that in their cameras.
Oh,
For
what makes you think that they don't have it already?
Exactly. How long they've had it is the question.
The question is, how accurate is it, right? I mean, you don't want to, you automatically,
This is
disable.
grandma. It's the dog.
You don't want, you don't want, automatic weapon, to automatically engage when the computer thinks, this is, that particular person working for that organization, right?
Yeah, terrorism. That'd be bad.
That'll be.
Especially if you're wearing a mask that was just supposed to look like it for like Halloween or something like that. Walk in front of the embassy. You're gone.
The profile seems to be used by process 5127 on post Debian. Okay, let's go ahead and kill that task first, because otherwise I can't use the browser. I can use the other browser. That's okay. I'll just go ahead and use the other browser. Firefox.
Firefox, thanks. Firefox is deleted.
Firefox in Debian, to be more specific.
Yeah.
All right, so what we'll talk about today is two-factor authentication. And that has become a fairly important topic with most websites that require people to sign in. Amazon has it. I think, what is the name of the website that allow you to upload files?
Dropbox?
Dropbox, yeah. Dropbox is starting to experiment. Huh?
Talking about like a password capture?
It's not, this is a two-factor authentication, and typically people use the RSA token with two-factor authentication. So that means you have your password, but you also have a little device that you carry with you that has a number on it, depending on the time. So what happens is the server on the other side that you're authenticating, on the machine that you want to gain access to, will also have the necessary software and the time to synchronize with your handheld device. So in addition to your password, you also have to put in a number that is only valid for what, 30 seconds?
Facebook has a
30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Facebook, it lasts for like minutes. I put my phone down, did something else, came back, and the code still worked.
Okay, it depends on the organization and how they set up. I think they can set it up
Severity of it.
right. How sensitive the data is and what you're doing and stuff like that.
That one in particular, whenever the code's in there, it disables that code for that time frame, like 5 minutes.
Yep. So that's becoming more and more popular because passwords is just not enough for authentication or for protection against something that is sensitive. In the past, you have to buy those tokens, RSA token. It's about a credit card size, little device that you have to carry with you, and it just shows a number that is updated every 30 seconds, a minute, or 2 minutes. I cannot remember the exact time, but it updates that number on the screen depending on the time. So every time you want to sign in to a particular service, you have to type in your password, your username, password, and then also the number that is displayed on the device itself. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Now, why do we want to do things like that? Why not just rely on password? Or what is this, why do you think it is a benefit?
Because it's a lot harder to get that code off the device than to just get a password.
Presumably, the next number, even if you can track down and look over the shoulder of somebody and know, let's say the last 10 numbers, supposedly you should not be able to guess what is the 11th number, the next number, because it's supposed to be really quote unquote random. But it's not truly random, because if it were truly random, then the other side cannot authenticate either. So it basically uses a huge prime number to come up with the next number in the sequence. And because the prime number is so big, it is really hard for someone to crack it and try to guess what the next number may be.
They've been cracked already. Yeah.
They have been cracked already because somebody hacked into the RSA website or their server, and they got a whole bunch of the prime numbers. So a lot of the code is already hacked. But these days, we all have smartphones, right? So with a smartphone, you can actually download apps that can do the same thing. So you can actually have your phone to double as the token to give you the second factor for authentication purposes. Google has its own two-factor authentication service, which is really neat because you can integrate it into your own server. Depending on what type of server you have and depending on what kind of service you want to offer, you can actually integrate the Google two-factor authentication method into whatever service that you're offering, which is kind of cool because people don't have to buy anything because they can just download an app to automatically generate the numbers. So I think that's worth looking into, and I think this is going to be, it will become more and more popular. The RSA devices were expensive, and they're only good for 2 years, or one. I cannot remember. There's a certain lifespan. With Google, offering this service basically for free, websites have no excuses not to use it. And you might think that, but since Google is in charge of generating these tokens, these numbers, maybe Google will be able to log into your website.
In China.
But they don't have your password. Remember, it's a two-factor thing. So I think this is something for you guys to keep an eye on for security purposes. How else are we going to make sure that when you log into a website that it is secure? How can a remote server, let's say Amazon.com or online banks, authenticate that you are really you and not somebody else pretending to be you?
Address?
IP address? IP address will work, but it doesn't work well on the phone because when you're using a phone, you have DHCP, and every time you sign in, you may be using a different IP address.
On top of their two-factor authenticating. Sorry, authenticating system. They also send you an authorization code, and usually by phone or by email or by text now.
Mm-hmm.
And they make you punch it after you go through the process. And if you get it wrong, I think like twice, they'll lock you up.
Yep.
Until you go and resolve it with the local bank.
That's also called an OTP, or one-time password. One-time password refers to a few different mechanisms, but that's one. Basically, they give you a code, and you have one chance to use it. Once you use that code, it is disabled, and you cannot use that code again. So that means if somebody is looking over your shoulder and copy that number down, as long as you press enter or you click the link first, the other person can get the code, and it would not be very useful to the other person. What else? What other things do you think you can use or potentially be used to authenticate that you are you. How about biometrics? Does everybody understand what is biometric?
Yeah.
Biometric means it is based on your biology, so there are many things that can uniquely identify you. Most people would think of what first in terms of biometrics? Fingerprints. Okay. What else do you think is going to be useful to identify who you are?
Your eyes. Retina scan.
Retina scan.
Retina scan, fingerprint, and then what else? Hmm? DNA.
Shape of your ear is supposed to be unique.
Oh, shape of your ear. I did not know that. The shape of the ear is supposed to be unique. But they can fake fingerprints, okay? You have seen, in CSI and many other shows, how to, lift the fingerprint of somebody else and actually fool a fingerprint, machine to think that it is you're somebody else. Retina scan, the same thing. You can probably fake it too using, devices.
Contact lens. Use a contact lens. It's easy. Just put another retina. And the other way you can do is you get to actually purposely dilate your retina. When you go to the optometrist, you get the dilation, and then put the contact over it. It's still the same thing. It's just like looking at someone's fingerprint.
But the retina is behind the pupil. So how can the contact lens
It's
do
kind of
it?
like an electronic type contact lens that holds an image of someone's retina. Yeah, it's really interesting that there's like a segment on it on TV like some other time. But yeah, there was one on it and it explains how it's going.
And even DNA can be faked. How many people have seen the movie called Gattaca? Okay, it's one of my favorite sci-fi movies. It's very low key. There are no lasers going on, no lightsabers. Very low key. And yet, I would consider that a true sci-fi. Because it is projecting a future that is already starting to happen. Because what they do is they use biometric to authenticate, who people are, and also the whole movie was about genetic engineering and the morality of doing that, and also discriminating against people who are not genetically engineered. Are they really lesser, or are they just different? That's the question. But in the movie, they were using biometric, like skin shaving, and fingernail and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Blood. But they were also using like dandruff and stuff like that, and that's why the guy had to carry a little bottle of stuff and sprinkle on the keyboard to basically make sure that people or the company continues to think that he's somebody else.
Yeah, it's an iron wool, I think it was, to scrub off any skin tails.
Yep. So. So it can be faked, okay? It can be, spoofed. Using today's term is called spoofed. Spoofing means, pretending to be somebody else, somebody that you are not. Okay. What other ways do you think we can use to authenticate or to, basically convince the other side that you are truly you?
Aside from biometrics?
Voice factor.
You said aside from biometrics or just in biometrics itself?
To use biometric to authenticate you are truly who you are.
Tongue imprints are unique.
Sorry?
A tongue imprint is unique. Everybody's taste buds are arranged differently, so it gives a different imprint.
So you have to lick the computer.
Yeah, I hate to be the last in line for that one.
Well, but licking the computer will also leave DNA samples too, so it's good for both the tongue print and also DNA. But we are getting to the point where whether you know it or not, your DNA, can be, somebody else can acquire your DNA, whether you know it or not.
Very easy.
It's very easy, exactly. And do you know that DNA is something that can be patented?
I think I remember hearing about that.
Yep, your DNA can be patented.
That way nobody can clone you or anything like that.
Well, it would just be against the law. They need your consent or license. They need to license your DNA in order to clone you. So that's all really interesting stuff. But on a cell phone that we use today these days, what can they do with existing hardware to do more biometric authentication? That is the question.
Face recognition?
Facial recognition, exactly. Because most phones have two cameras now. So you can basically just take a picture of yourself and use that for authentication purposes. Now you might think that, but that's easy to spoof because you can just take a picture of somebody else that you want to pretend, and stick the picture in front of the camera and go, okay, yes, I am the CEO of Wells Fargo. Let me access the server, right? But what if it is interactive? What if the other side can challenge this, the local side and say, now smile. Okay. Now, if you have a picture of the other person,
Smile.
then it's pretty hard to do it, okay? Because you can swap the picture to someone who's actually to the same person who's smiling, but the switch is going to be obvious because it's not a gradual thing, and the computer can keep, taking the picture or video of you the whole time. So when they see an abrupt change of expression that is not gradual, they can already tell that, okay, maybe we should not authenticate in this case. Or be angry, The problem is, when somebody is angry and the challenge, is to tell that person to smile, that person may not get access to the server and even get angrier, which lower the chances of logging in even further. But you can see, how, even with existing hardware that we have, we already have more hardware than we need in order to implement biometric authentication. What about heartbeat? I personally do not know how unique our heartbeat pattern is. How does anyone know? Anyone works in the medical field?
Google it.
No. I think it's not unique, but each person has or there are different types of heartbeats. And how can the phone sample your heartbeat?
With the
Put
touch
the phone
screen.
You gotta put the phone to your heart or something?
No, actually that's pretty easy. Most phones now have a flashlight or continuous LED next to the camera. So what you do, or there are apps to do it already. So you put your finger over the camera, and the app will turn on the flashlight, and your finger is for the most part translucent. So when your heart pumps the blood, it has pulses. It will actually sense the pulsing through the light will shine through your finger, and it will illuminate your the blood vessels and whatnot. The camera will pick up the diffused light from the blood vessels. So when your heart pumps, it will actually sense the light level changing, and therefore be able to tell your heartbeat. It actually works. I have 2 apps to do that. One app to just measure the heartbeat and the pulse, and the other one to see how tense I am, to see whether I'm at a calm state. Because when people are calm, the interval between heartbeat is supposed to be fairly constant, but when someone is agitated, the interval between heartbeat becomes kind of more erratic, and they use that as an indicator of whether someone is calm or not.
Like a moon. It's like a moonstone on your phone.
Exactly, and it's free. It's a free app.
Yeah. It doesn't take as long to take a
The
photo.
moonstone doesn't work on me because I'm always warm, so regardless.
Yeah.
So are we doing okay so far with authentication and all the potential authentication methods that we have not even explored with most websites? They have not even considered these biometric authentication methods. Do you guys want to do apps, mobile apps? Now that we have ideas, nobody wants.
First, we need to take a class.
Yeah, you have to take a few classes, but I think there's a lot of potential in mobile app development. We'll get to the software side, or how to develop software later on. So let's go back to software. I think we are pretty much all done with this. Information tools, organizing your... Let's start with this one. How serious is software piracy? Well, the first question is, what is software piracy? What do you think is considered software piracy?
The illegal distribution of copyrighted or copyrighted material.
Or the use of software that is conflicting with the EULA. Okay, if the EULA tells you that you can only use the software in this particular way, and the way you use the software is not what it is supposed to be, it's already kind of piracy already. Okay, it's not piracy unless you distribute the software, but if you install the software on more computers than you should, it's already against the EULA. But piracy kind of implies that somebody is making money or somebody is saving a significant amount of money. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And how do you, or how, not you, but how do people pirate software in general?
Download it, share it, download it.
You can take the executable, or you can take an ISO, basically the image of a CD, and redistribute the CD, image, all over the web. But that's not going to be very useful these days. Why not?
So you need an authentication code.
You need an authentication code to activate the product. Okay. So the activation of a product, make sure that people cannot just okay, here's my DVD. Go ahead and install the software and use the same code to activate, because if let's say you're installing software from Microsoft, the activation code can only be used a certain number of times, and Microsoft can log everything about the authentication or the activation process. In other words, Microsoft can log not only that at this time from this IP address, this product has been activated by this code, but it can also get information from your computer and transmit that information to the Microsoft website. Stuff like how much RAM you have on your machine, how big is your hard drive, what is the identification on the processor itself. Do you guys know that your processor has an ID itself? No? Yes? Kind of? Every processor from AMD and Intel and all manufacturers, major manufacturers, has an internal code, unique internal code. Sorry?
It's unique.
It is unique. So that means a publisher can uniquely identify a single machine if they wanted to. And they can associate that with your IP address. They can actually track you down if they wanted to. This is all a part of, guess what? The Trusted Computing Initiative. Remember that stuff that we talked about earlier? They wanted to change TCP/IP so that every packet or every connection in TCP/IP would also transmit that information. So every transmission from your computer to whatever computer you want to transmit to will identify which computer you're using uniquely. That's what they were thinking about doing. It was not. They have not done it yet. But you can kind of imagine, what people can do with all that information. It's not only to stop piracy, but they can also intrude into your privacy, because now they can track you down, anytime, anywhere, whatever you do, they can track you down. With the activation process, you cannot just share a DVD ISO and be able to share the software. So how do you think the pirates defeat that? Yep, go ahead.
They still could distribute the CD image. The CD is not what it doesn't authenticate anything. That's why they always make sure you connect it to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still use keygens that people find random, going through the whole 10 digits sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Keep on going up until they found one that works, and then they just put it in a keygen and just randomly select it. And usually people don't. Because it's not activated online, most people would make sure their computer's off to authenticate it through that one process and pull the plug on the internet, so it just connects to the rest.
Yep. So there are still ways to do it. The good thing is, from the publisher's perspective, the good thing is most big organizations do not pirate software because the fine or the resulting risk is too big. It's not worth it. It's mostly individuals or smaller companies or smaller organizations who would kind of do the pirating, and not the big ones. The other thing has to do with the pricing of products. I'm pretty sure you talked about this already. How much do you think Microsoft Office costs in China?
2 cents.
A whole lot cheaper than it is here. Why is that the case?
That's where the CDs are cut. That's where the CDs are cut.
Well, the CDs are basically next to nothing. Okay, so the price of the software or the license has nothing to do with the material cost of distributing the software.
Piracy is probably more rampant, so they have to sell it cheaper if they want to sell this even worse in
Exactly.
Russia.
Exactly. When you look at you can look at it as a graph here. This is how much money it costs to purchase software. And let's say this is a risk factor of, what if I get caught, copying or distributing pirated copies of software. When you are dealing with open source software, there's no risk at all. When you're dealing with very inexpensive software, the risk is usually pretty low. But when you're dealing with, excuse me, I take it back. When dealing with high,
You should probably put risk on your X axis and dollars on your Y.
no, it's not the risk, it's the willingness to pirate.
Yeah.
How likely someone is going to kind of pirate. So this is, we just call it P for probability. Okay, that someone has an incentive to pirate the software. So it has to do with when something is free, nobody's going to pirate it, right? Because it cannot be pirated. It's free. When something is not too expensive, like low cost, people don't have a whole lot of incentive to pirate. But when the software cost increases, then people are more and more and more likely to pirate that software. Is that making any sense? Now the cutoff point, this curve also depends on how much money you are making. Now let's say it's in the United States. I don't know what is the median income in the United States, but software typically will cost $100 or so for licensing purposes. But in many countries, people only make $50 US per month. Okay, so if software is costing twice of what you make per month, and you're barely making a living in that case, people have all the incentive to pirate the software. The probability becomes 1. It's already at the top part here because people cannot afford the software. And that's why in China and other regions in the world, Microsoft products are priced differently. They're significantly less expensive than it is here, because if they try to charge people the same amount of money in those countries, the probability of piracy is 100%. So they have to lower the price, so that companies and even the government would not try to pirate the software. We are talking about not individuals pirating software. We are talking about school systems, the government, large agencies pirating software in this case. Is that making any sense? Okay. And in this part, they also talk about, is software piracy really damaging? So the question is, well, how much money are these software companies losing because of piracy? That is a little bit debatable. What the number is somewhat debatable. Yep.
They're not losing a sale, they're losing the possibilities, not possibility. They're not actually losing a sale. They may gain sales because of piracy, because some people just want to pirate to try out the product before they buy it.
Yep. But you can also argue if they install it, permanently, then the company will lose one opportunity or lose one potential customer as an income source. Yep. Go ahead. I thought you. Nope. Okay. But what do you think of this whole business concept of licensing, making money or making an income of a company out of licensing products? What do you guys think? Yep.
Been going on for Windows 3.1. It's been going for software. Just
Yep.
Talking about community industry.
Right.
It's been going on ever since then.
Yep.
I mean, that's the business model for
Microsoft. And
or
Adobe.
Even Google to some extent, not a whole lot, but most
Google
of their
makes
revenue comes from their
advertisement,
Yeah.
exactly.
But the business model for anybody who develops software, video games, operating systems, programs you use, anything like that, that's their model, is to sell you license.
Okay. Now, when they sell you a license, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. But I personally don't agree with licensing out products. I think that how do you sell someone's idea in code? That's the philosophical argument when it comes to software in general and licensing. It's like, how do you sell code? That's basically what they're doing. They're selling you a license to the code.
They're selling you the permission to use the product
Yeah.
in a certain way.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're selling you. That's what a license is. It's basically an agreement that you would use the product in a certain way that is outlined in the EULA. Okay, so which by itself, is a concept. Because if you don't like it, you can choose alternatives. And there were not a whole lot of alternatives like 10, 15 years ago, but now there are alternatives. What kind of alternatives are we talking about? Let's say that you do not agree that software companies should charge money just for the agreement or for the permission to use a software product. What alternatives do you have?
It's everywhere. You can go open source, so you can start writing your own program.
Yep, you can use open source, or you can start to write your own software. Writing your own software is very complicated because if you look at any type of major product, like productivity software, photo editing software, and so on and so forth, they're pretty big projects. A single person cannot possibly take on a task that big. But when you look at open source products, there are a lot of alternatives. And that's why software companies are getting smarter, because if consumers understand, hey, I have an alternative here, I'll just buy a blank box with nothing installed on it, and I'll choose what I want to install. Okay, and consumers sometimes will get smart and go, okay, that's the best way to go. I don't want to pay or prepay for a license to use an operating system that I do not really want to use. And how do you think software companies are going around that problem? Okay, first of all, let me ask this question. How many people assembled or make your own PC that you're using at home? Okay, so I would say that's about, I will call it generously 15% of this class. What about the other 85%? You bought a computer from a store with some stuff already pre-installed, right? So when Windows is pre-installed on the PC that you bought, who paid for the license of that Windows? And then the manufacturer charges you, so they're just passing the cost to you, right? Now you might think from the manufacturer's perspective, hey, what is the big deal if Dell or Lenovo or Toshiba decide to give you an option when you purchase a PC? If you want to use Windows 8 or Windows 7, this is it's 30 or whatever number of money they want to charge you. If you want it to be blank with nothing installed, you can deduct $30 from the cost of your PC. That would be pretty easy for manufacturers to do. Why don't they do it?
They get paid for it?
Well, in a way it is, but it's not quite that way. Okay, it's in a way what you said is absolutely true. It's really the opposite way. Okay, so let's just say that I make my own company, Tax Computer Inc. Okay, and I sell notebook computers, desktop computers, and stuff. So people can customize the computer, and I will I will make these things, and I'll ship it to my customers. Well, I have to talk to Microsoft, because I don't want to pay the retail price of Microsoft, Windows 7, because that's a lot of money. What is the cost of Windows 7? Not an upgrade, but the entire thing. Is it $100?
Yeah.
And that's for home, right?
Just for home premium.
Yeah, home premium. So $100. $100 is a lot of money when you're trying to sell PCs, because you'll be competing against what? Asus. You'll be competing against.
Asus, MSI, Dell, Toshiba's,
Yep.
Lenovo, Gateway.
Yep, you'll be competing against all these much bigger companies, and they have big production plants and plants in China, so they know how to reduce the cost of products. If the licensing of Windows alone is $100, I have no hope of selling my product. So I have no choice but to go to Microsoft and say, hey, can you give me a discount? I'm trying to sell products here. If you give me a discount, I can sell more of my products, and as a result, you can sell more copies of your licenses. Microsoft will come back to me and say, yeah, I can cut you a deal. Okay, I'm just making up numbers here. So they will say, if you are a manufacturer, I can sell the licenses to you $50 a piece. Okay, I'm just making up numbers here. And then they find out that I give my customers an option of not installing any operating system. Then Microsoft will come back and say, guess what, TAC? if you if you remove that option from your product, that people can choose not to have Windows installed, I'll cut you even a better deal. I'll make the license $30 each, or $35, whatever. Okay, it's a lower price per copy. Okay, so from my perspective, since 95% of my clients want to have Windows already pre-installed, it makes sense for me to take that offer and just say, okay, fine, I'll remove that option. People who want to install Ubuntu or some version of Windows or Linux or BSD, they can pay that $30 of cost that I'm paying, but they can always just nuke Windows and reinstall another operating system. And that's why we don't see that option when you buy computers. There's no such option of let's not include an operating system and you can install whatever you want at your cost. You have to pay for that, the time or the licensing. But you can pick whatever you want. That's not an option.
You can dual boot.
Hmm?
You can dual boot.
You can dual boot, but you're still paying for that license. Every single one of us, when we purchase a computer from a manufacturer, we are paying for that license. Whether you want to use it or not, you are paying for it. Okay. Do we have any questions about this part? Yep. Question? Oh, okay. So in a way, manufacturers or hardware manufacturers are strong-armed into distributing, certain types of software because they don't really have an option to say no. I mean, out of economics, they cannot really say no. Are there any questions about this slide about software piracy? No questions? And this part here is try it. You guys can read about it and give it a try. What is the extent of piracy, and is there any way to stop it? Well, the question is not whether there's a technical way to stop it. The question is there any way to reduce software piracy? What do you guys think?
Yeah, drop the prices.
Drop the prices? Okay. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I think one day, not too far from today, licenses will be like subscriptions, like a magazine subscription. In other words, you're not paying for the licensing of Windows 8 when you upgrade to Windows 8. Every year, you're going to pay Microsoft a certain amount of money to keep your existing licenses. Oh, I don't feel like upgrading this year. I think I'll stick with Windows 7. Guess what? You still have to pay because it's a subscription now. Okay, that day is coming. I think relatively soon, because it's a really good model from the perspective of software vendors, because this is a stable income stream. Because Microsoft can easily estimate how many copies of Windows is out there, and then they can say, okay, we'll multiply that number by $30 per year. They know that's a reliable revenue. They don't have to worry about, oh, but what if people do not like Windows 8 and decide to stick with Windows 7? Because that's an unknown factor, right? From the manufacturer's or the vendor's perspective, I don't know how many copies of Windows 8 I'm going to sell. I can only guarantee how many licenses of Windows 8 I can sell through Toshiba, through Lenovo, and so on, because the production of laptop computers and notebook computers, and desktop computers, is somewhat predictable. But the existing installed base is unpredictable. People may like it, and everybody wants to upgrade, like from Vista to Windows 7. That was a huge success. Windows 7 is Vista fixed, for the most part. There's very few additional feature in Windows 7. But with Windows 8, most companies, corporations are already saying we are not upgrading. They, because they don't want to go through the whole cycle of installing a new operating system, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, fix the part that doesn't work, and so on and so forth. Windows 7 works, and they just want to stay with Windows 7. So from Microsoft's perspective, that revenue that they wanted to get from the sales of Windows 8 is not guaranteed. There's a risk factor in that. But if they change to a subscription model, then there's no risk factor. Okay, every year we'll just collect X amount of money per license per computer.
Funny thing about Windows 8, back when it was like beginning stages, I actually got a release client for it, and didn't have like the standard desktop like Windows 7 does.
Yeah.
So a lot of people complain. They're like, okay, well this is ridiculous. I don't have a touchscreen monitor. Why the hell do I need tiles? So they actually developed the desktop and disabled the tiles on any computer that isn't touchscreen.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you buy Windows 8, you're buying Windows 7 Redux if you don't have a touchscreen.
Well, do they have any additional features in Windows 8 that is unique and useful?
No.
Unique is not enough. It has to be a useful feature, right?
No.
Any new stability?
The live tiles and stuff are only available for touchscreen and tablets, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's completely useless.
Yep. So there you have it. There you have it. Now, is there any way to stop piracy?
Well, and even communism would probably help. Communism, and even then, there's probably still be something.
Well, China is one of the countries where piracy is the most rampant because of the population, because there are 1 something billion people, and also because the median income is lower, much lower than in the United States.
Well, like 10 years ago, piracy was just as bad as it is today. The problem is that the law has kind of caught up to where we are technologically speaking when it comes to software piracy. So like everybody's like, oh, piracy's gone rampant. No, it's always been this. It's been close to the same amount of people pirating. It's just it became enforceable. The EULA became enforceable at law.
Mm-hmm.
Like so, that's the problem. So it's not that piracy hasn't been happening, and all of a sudden just everybody decided to steal Windows 7, CS, all the other stuff. But like, it's just they started prosecuting people, and so like that was the biggest fear 10 years ago. It's like the EULA is going to become this legally binding contract between the customer and the company.
But it's not.
But it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But it's starting to be. Like they're starting to say, this is in this licensing agreement. You agreed to this.
Right.
Now we're going to prosecute. And so it's slowly becoming that. Like it's slowly becoming, EULA is technically an at-law enforceable contract,
Right.
even though it's not. So.
And that's becoming, that's a shift, that the media companies have already gone through. If you pirate, video or audio content, they can come get your computer, I think, quicker and easier than your local police department.
Yeah. And they'll nuke your hard drive.
Oh, they can do all kinds of stuff. They want all your friends, phone number and email address and stuff like that. You had a point to make earlier.
I did, but I lost my train of thought.
Another train
Although
wreck.
it was more along the lines of video game piracy instead of just like operating system or types
Well,
of
let's talk about video game piracy, which is a very interesting topic.
Because what I bring up is that the only way to really slow down or even stop video game piracy is to stop trying to stop piracy.
Exactly. Now, this is a very interesting topic because how do you think the game vendors, game manufacturers, make sure that people purchased their own license of games and stuff like that? How do they do it? Does anyone want to share? Yep.
It's a
Product key code.
A key code, but in addition to a key code, there's more. In other words, okay, go ahead.
You always have to be online.
You always have to be online, okay? Even in single player mode, where all the files are on the DVD already, you could have played a game without being online, and you still have to be online because every time you play the game, every time you start the executable, it checks, it will go back to the server and try to authenticate and say, should I run? Okay, this is all the data that I get from this computer. And then the remote server will have to say, yeah, go ahead and run the game, or no, do not run the game because I'm suspecting this is not the right computer. Okay?
Tell you something more interesting. And does anyone in here play Blizzard games like Diablo 3,
Used to.
StarCraft? Okay. Every time you connect to Battle.net
Mm-hmm.
with a Blizzard game, there's a program called Warden that starts up. Every time you'll see it says updating Blizzard tools. What it's actually doing is updating the definitions of Warden. Every time you log into the game, it's checking for like bots and other things like that people run. So on top of having to be online all the time, you're also downloading basically Blizzard security software to check your computer to make sure you're not running things.
It's anti-privacy, but also at the same time anti-privacy too.
Yeah.
Because depending on what type of information they collect and send back to the server, do they actually tell you what information is sent back to the server?
It's required by law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know how much?
Unanimous user statistics is, anonymous user statistics is not anonymous because they have your IP address, your MAC address, and that's easy to identify somebody. I can go. There's a website you can go to. You put in your home IP address, you can be located within a mile of that IP address.
Yep.
So I mean, it's not like it's anonymous and they can't find you, but they're required to keep that information private, and I mean, there are privacy practices listed on sites that do that.
Yeah,
Just
but
like
what if their
Google
website get hacked? Now here's another scenario. Let's say you purchase a game, you went to Fry's, you go to the shelf, you purchase a shrink wrap game for say $40-50 or so. Is that about where games are?
64 new. 64 new.
Okay. So let's say you purchase a new game and you went home, you installed the game, it needed to be online to play the game. Okay, you got internet access from home and you connected online. But let's just say that the implementation on their side, their server, has a problem, and it decided to deny everybody access to the game. How would that make you feel? You just spent $60-something on a game that you really wanted to play. You got all the hardware requirement. You got internet access. You play everything by the rule, and yet you cannot play the game.
I can tell you how Diablo 3 players felt. Pissed off.
Those players crashed the server.
Yeah. 7 million people logged on when the game was released
At the same time.
at the same time, and the servers just goes, nope, not doing it. Sorry, haven't
Exactly.
You know what? I quit.
Yeah, but
this job is not worth it.
But you paid for the game. You did not do anything wrong. You did not pirate. Okay, you did everything that you right already, and yet you did not get the gaming experience out of the product.
You almost
At
break
all.
a keyboard.
If this were any other product, I'm pretty sure some gamers have done it too. They would have sued the company and demand money back or some other thing,
Yeah.
right? Does it make sense that you should get something back?
Yeah, retribution.
Well, it's not retribution. It's
Something like that.
I wasted my time. I wasted my money. Yep.
Gaming companies have actually realized that.
Exactly.
And so they actually offer a return policy. Not a lot of people know about this, but like if you contact a gaming company and you're not satisfied with the service, there's certain limits. It's like some companies it's 2 weeks, some companies it's 30 days. You contact the company, I'm not satisfied, this is the reasons, they cannot deny you a return and refund. If they do, then you can seek legal action, and that's actually part of the terms of service.
Don't tell that to Steam.
Steam. What did they do?
They don't do refunds.
Aha. So
Blatantly,
So
Well,
once you
because
pay for it,
right into their.
Steam's a vendor, not a company. That's totally different. So like Steam, like what is it? They just host
I think
Bethesda's through Steam.
Well,
I have a good
Valve,
analogy for this.
all
I think
the-
like the machines out there that when you put your money in it, and it spins out the stuff.
Like that.
It does, it doesn't always spit it out. So if there's a problem with it, you don't really have much of an option.
Also, sometimes it doesn't work or it doesn't
Not a lot of
stop
legal
just
options,
because
correct.
it's fun.
wait until I bring
No.
on my lightsabers.
Yeah, because you're not allowed to shake it.
You're gonna go all
Well, yeah,
space
yeah.
on your computer one day.
What about the rest of the software industry? What if they copy this approach every time you start up Microsoft Word or Excel, every time you start up Photoshop, you have to go online and they have to authenticate who you are and give you permission to run that program that one time.
I don't think the software industry is ready for something like that, to be honest. It's not, and it's not from a technological standpoint, but just from a customer service standpoint, they're not ready at all.
Exactly. That's why sometimes. Well, that's also the reason why Windows is not as secure as it can be. Now, most people think of Windows versus Linux as, Windows is insecure, but Linux is. The thing is, the kernel of Windows is fairly secure. Okay, it's a fairly nicely architected kernel. Even though it's really old and dated, they did it right. Okay, whoever
shell.
invented it's the shell, the user interface that is not secure. Okay, so let me ask you this question: most of you have installed software on a computer. Most of you have have to deal with administrative issues and whatnot. What if Windows Home comes with two accounts, one for administration, one for end users? You use the end user account to browse the web so that if you get infected, it will be localized to the user account. You use the administrative account to install new software so that you can double check, which software you're installing, coming from whom, whether you can trust that company or not, and run virus scanners and whatnot. What do you think? They just make this one distinction: two users, one for browsing the web, one for installing software. How much tech support call Microsoft is going to get? Go ahead.
Well, it's actually advised that you have two accounts because there's more than just security issues. Some people forget their password. It's always good to have another account that you could shut down the other account. It's advised, it's written in the instruction manual, but people just ignore it. And hey, I'll use the administrator right here.
Yep.
They want to feel powerful by being the admin, so they just be it, and they allow everything that goes through. But every time it says, administration rates, do you want to hit yes or no? And always let it through.
It's because of the user base of Windows.
Windows is not secure. It's not Windows' fault. It's your fault for letting it through.
Exactly. Yep.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I went through this when I was learning how to use Linux just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Linux makes you go through hoops,
Yeah.
to install something.
If you want to install software on Linux, you need to know the super user password. You have to know what exactly you're looking for, and then you have to confirm it once you get what you're looking for.
Yep.
And so what he's actually talking about is what Linux does by default. There's a root, what's called a root user and your user.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot, from the login screen, unless you set it up, log into the administrative account. You actually have to go inside the end user account, then go to it's a couple of command lines to go into the root, and then install programs.
Let's just say that you cannot just go to a website, and click a link and get something installed by clicking a few yeses.
Because Linux will go, not doing it.
But what would that do to Microsoft tech support if Microsoft were to tighten up security for the home edition?
It'll get flooded.
They get flooded, exactly, because the average end user is not ready for something like that.
I think it's awesome. I actually thought about redoing my user account because of it.
Organizing your writing. So this part has to do with using word processors. There are other types of concept. This is called a concept map, and they talk about web applications, stuff like that. I have that application installed here as well. Let me look at here. It's called FreeMind, and it does exactly the same thing. It doesn't use bubbles all the time. You can choose to use bubbles if you want to, but it's called a mind map. But it's basically a concept map. Now, when you're writing, let's say an English paper, sometimes it's helpful just to capture concepts and ideas without actually writing down, full sentences. And this makes it kind of more visual, because I can say, okay, let's say we change this to security. And under security, I might want to say something, overall speaking, there are different types of security. So authentication is one issue. And under authentication, I might want to add some sub-items. Let's say biometrics. And what else is related? Two-factor. And let's say strong password. And so on. In other words, I'm using this quote-unquote map as an outline of concepts and ideas, and I can see how the concepts connect, but not in the written document format. And this is useful for people who are more visual, so they can see the concepts in a more visual way instead of having to type everything in a text document. What is the problem with a text document? I could have done this using the outline mode of Microsoft Word, using bullet points and stuff like that, using the indentation to indicate which idea is a sub-idea of what else. How would you compare this approach with using the text equivalence of this idea?
A lot of tabs.
Sorry?
A lot of tabs.
A lot of tabs, but that's okay because Microsoft Word and also Writer, Open Office, the LibreOffice Writer, can keep track of indentation pretty easily. What about the number of concepts and ideas that I can display in one screenful without having to scroll?
Quite a bit.
In a text document, I would have to scroll a little more because because I only need this much space in terms of the column, but it will be this long. But using this concept, I can I can basically distribute a lot more concepts and still be able to see the structure of the concepts without having to scroll. And that's why concept maps or mind maps in this case is helpful. Okay, and this is a free software. It's actually Java based, so it will basically run on any computer that has Java on it. When you're writing English papers, give it a try. I'm not saying that it will guarantee you an A in your writing, but at least it might help you organize the concepts a little bit better, and therefore you can structure the paper a little bit better. Any feedback, comments about using this kind of software? Yep.
Is that just FreeMind, like depackaged FreeMind, or?
You just look up FreeMind. I think it is. You can find it inside portable apps too.
Because I want to put it on my Debian install.
Mind map portable. There are different types too. And not portable apps. There you go. So you can put it onto a thumb drive. Like last time when we talked about portable apps. Even my cell phone has a similar program to do mind mapping. And it works really well with a cell phone too, because even with a smaller screen, it's actually pretty visual because you just kind of click it and you can scroll it pretty easily. And personally, I think it's a really great tool to use. Let's see how much space it takes to install it.
This is a forum.
Oh, this is a forum. It doesn't.
Also makes sense to have that on a phone rather than have like a word processing document or program on a phone, because
Right.
it's a lot more.
You don't have the space to use, and also a lot of word processing software require a lot of clicks. With Microsoft products, you have to go to the ribbon and click many times to get to something. Even with OpenOffice or LibreOffice, you have to rely on the menu a lot. For experienced users, you can use the hotkeys. You can just press Control F to search, Control S to save the file, and so on and so forth. But a phone is touch based. You can't really say Control F or Control S. Okay, so that means a lot of the conventional stuff that we use that we associate with word processing would not work well on a mobile device with a much smaller screen and a touch based interface.
Then you could. When they use since now most phones now, even the Android and Apple, the most prized thing is the voice recognition. They can just use that now. Voice command has been always there.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's already got to a point that you basically don't even have to train the program anymore with your voice. It just works right out of the box. Now you just implement that and it'll work.
I can imagine that in a English writing class, everybody's talking to their phone, and all the cross-talk that happens. Like my phone is writing down what you said, and so on and so forth. That would be troubling.
You still train the voice and just
But you will be distracted by the other people too. That's the other problem. Yep.
The Mac has the same thing too. Like you can do speech on everything.
Mm-hmm. How accurate is the speech recognition?
It's pretty good after you use it like a couple times.
So it self-trains.
Yeah.
Now, when it's in training mode, do you have to correct it? Like this is not what I said. This is what I said.
Well, because I have like a little accent, like it will do it. Yeah, I have to correct it sometimes.
So you correct it, and therefore you train the software to recognize what you're saying.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Now the other thing, since we were on this mobile device, train, before the train wrecks, I'm gonna talk about one more thing. Just the possibility, especially for those of you who want to develop mobile apps and find new users of your phones. More and more phones now have 2 cameras for 3D cameras. Okay, the cost of adding one more camera, especially a lower resolution one, is not that much. They don't have to jack up the price of your phone all that much. But most people think, well, but why do I need like a 3D camera on my phone? It's not. You don't even need a 3D display. You just need 2 cameras on one side. But what that allows you to do, or allows the phone to do, is it will get a 3D image or a sense of 3D of what it's seeing. Which also means your user interface has now just been expanded, quite a bit. Because instead of touching it, you can now wave your hand on top of it or gesture in free air without touching the screen. And if it has a 3D interpretation of objects in front of it, it can now recognize gestures, 3D gestures, which increases the amount of stuff you can communicate with your phone tremendously. Are you guys kind of seeing what I'm talking about?
I get what you're
the
saying.
phone projecting the hologram of your user interface in air, so you can use it to command your phone.
No, I'm just talking about if my phone rings and I want it to kind of shut up, I'll just go this, or it's a particular gesture to communicate with my
I see what
phone.
you're on.
I think some Korean phones already have that feature. I watched one ad, it's really kind of cool. It was a house, quote unquote housewife, making cookie dough or some other really sticky dough kind of thingy, and then the phone rang, and she couldn't pick up the phone. So what she said was she walked over and then used her elbow to go like this, and then the phone picked up and automatically switched to speakerphone mode, and she was able to carry on a phone conversation without having to touch the phone at all. So that's really just the beginning of what you can do with a 3D image, right? Because with a 3D image you can do a lot more, because depending on how distant, how far you can see, using the 3D vision, you can do a lot of things. Xbox 360, what is the add-on that allows you to do 3D stuff with it? Kinect, right? Okay. What kind of stuff do you think you can do with Kinect when it's installed on the regular desktop computer?
Motion capture.
Motion capture. You can also gesture it. Instead of using a mouse pointer, now you can just gesture it, or you can, if the resolution is high enough, you can move your head and you can track the point that way.
Yeah, actually you can. Actually you can. On
Yep.
the PC.
On the PC?
Yeah.
Because there are enough features on your face that with a high enough resolution Kinect, they can tell the orientation of your face relative to the device, so they can control a mouse pointer exactly like that.
Someone's already connected one to a free roaming UAV before. So.
Just don't sneeze. That might fire the weapon, right? Yep.
Like the smart TVs, they have smart TVs.
Uh-huh.
You can then it'll change channel, or like if you double tap or like pop something up.
Is it 3D based, or is it just a 2D interpretation of your gesture?
It's just 2D, but like you pretty much talk to the TV and then it does what you want.
Yep.
For the Kinect, if you have Ghost Recon Future Soldier, you can break apart your weapons with the actual Kinect and turn it towards 3D base. So you can see everything from the gas systems to the barrel and everything, and switch it around so you can see it in 3 dimensions.
So that means the device actually has a very, very high resolution image of of you, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to do all these things, with the precision that it has. Yep.
I believe it uses thermal cameras on it to disconcert you from the environment.
The distance will automatically do that too, because your background is further away from you, and there's a sharp cut off, of your
I heard
silhouette.
they were having, when it first came out, they were having problems because some people just wouldn't work for them.
Because thermal technology is very expensive. It's the hardware for thermal imaging is considerably more expensive than the visible spectrum. Yep.
It uses skeletal points for tracking.
Mm-hmm.
When you first set it up, basically it makes a skeleton. It's a 10-point skeleton. So
Does it actually project
Yeah,
grids?
I'll show you.
So it projects grids of lasers
Yeah.
on you first, and then based on triangulation of the
Yeah.
reflection, they can tell where the points are actually located in 3D space.
The most interesting thing I've seen with the Kinect is actually, depending on what kind of music you like, but anyways, they actually developed a program that allowed an individual to basically DJ
Mm-hmm.
just with the Kinect. And they projected the images of what he was using for his music
Mm-hmm.
on a wall,
Yeah.
and he played music doing that. So.
The only problem with that type of application is with a real DJ, there's a physical device to rest your hand on. Now, if the Kinect is actually free in air, your hand will get tired really quickly because it's not resting on something. So you need the Kinect to basically interpret the image of your hand but your hand still has to rest on something in order for this to be ergonomically correct.
Well, like when he wasn't using one hand and you put it straight to his side, it didn't activate. So it had to be at a certain level, I guess.
This reminded me of another sci-fi movie. Which one? See if you guys can track my thoughts.
Sci-fi movie, probably Minority Report.
Yep, Minority Report. Remember Tom Cruise was doing all the other, all the air stuff. Try doing that for half an hour. Most of it will be, sweating, and at the end of the day, we have muscle sore, because of that. Okay, because it's just not ergonomically, friendly. Because it's cool to do it for the first 3 minutes, but after the first 3 minutes, it's gonna get pretty tiring.
I was about to say most of us are geeks, so like 3 minutes and then we'd be done. We'd just be like,
So the best way to do the best way to do user interface is to do head and basically your body tracking, but also do eye tracking, because we do a lot of work with just rolling our eyes or controlling the movement of our eyes instead of the entire face.
Then that brings you to the new Google glasses, where it tracks your retina, and it just basically pull up whatever you need to play depending on where your retina goes.
Right. So a 800 by 600 screen now can emulate a much bigger screen, because it only needs to project what you're looking at. So your actual virtual screen can be a lot bigger, but to you it is just as big, because your peripheral vision is not really all that much. We don't have a whole lot of peripheral vision like most plant eater animals have a lot of peripheral vision, because everybody wants to eat them. Right, so they need to find out who's approaching me from which angle and run the other way. But we don't really have a lot of peripheral vision by comparison, and only the center part of our vision we actually interpret consciously. So that means a lower resolution part only for that part is already sufficient. Unless you're playing like action shoot 'em up games, then you need your peripheral vision too to see who's coming from the dark corner and stuff like that.
Yeah, they made a video with the Google glasses playing Battlefield. The dude
Oh.
jumped over some gate or something, some restricted area, and it showed up. It said restricted area. He's like, yeah, whatever. And he downloaded Battlefield, and it downloaded the game or whatever, and he started playing and started shooting people and stuff. And then he went on top of the building, and it said he called his buddy, and he was holding a gun in his hand, and he looked out, and it showed like planes flying across within the sunset, and all this dramatic stuff was going on. He's like, "It's the new Battlefield!" And it was like flipping out. It was really cool.
And interestingly, I think that's how battles will be actually fought in the future.
It's like they
We'll
actually
have
have
robots, that we are remotely controlling and stuff like that. Is that the one that you guys were mentioning,
Yeah.
Project
I
Glass?
think us.
It looks weirder than that. You actually see it on
That's
people.
too bad.
Well,
I
these
think
are all
it's actually-
prototypes.
What am I getting myself a
Video.
subscription pair of those?
Well, these are all prototypes too, so it's not necessarily how the product speaking French, right?
Yeah, but I mean, just even if it's prototypes or whatever,
YouTube.
it's
It's still awesome.
yeah.
YouTube should have it.
Hook
YouTube?
up an Xbox to
YouTube
that.
have a lot of stuff on it.
Play some Halo. Go through downtown. Pretty cool. DF.
I did not know what I wanted to do, except that I knew the woman I wanted to be. I wanted to be on the go, I wanted to be able to pay my own bills, and I so much wanted to be independent. My goal in life is to tell every girl, every woman in the world that they can be the one they want to be. I'm filming. It's very pretty, very pretty. Real Cinderella shoes. They are beautiful.
Okay, I'm just gonna pause it here because a thought just occurred to me. Is there's no need for real models anymore. I mean, seriously, there are no need for real models anymore. There are shops, maybe not in the United States, but elsewhere in the world. There are shops where you can buy, a person can go in and buy, a dress or a shirt or whatever, and the software can take a picture of the person and project what that person will look like with the dress or shirt or suit or whatever worn. It's already done. It's already done. So you're not looking at a picture of someone with a different physique, wearing that, dress or whatever, and and then later on, when someone puts it on and go like, I don't really look nearly as good as that person, on the picture, because you get a more realistic picture of how you would look with that particular cloth on you, and it's already done. It really is.
Fashion Week is crazy because it's a lot of work, and then at the end it only lasts 10 minutes. I'm glad that I didn't forget the girl code that used to belong to my father during the war when he had to escape.
Hot glue, don't use tape.
And it's a very good luck code.
And use epoxy.
Okay, guys, I'm off to the show. Fashion Week is very important for New York City. Lots of people come in from all over the world, and it's just an incredible moment of...
Go to YouTube? Mm-hmm. Okay. But you can also imagine, how, the Google Glass can also kind of intrude into privacy, if the settings are not done right, or Google try to play tricks on its clients, because it sees what you see. I'm sorry?
That car's about to hit you. What?
You just keep spinning until the server crashes, right? Sit yourself on top of a chair like this and keep spinning, and then until the server crashes. It's like, who caused the server to crash today?
You get like 1,000 people to do that just simultaneously.
That would be pretty funny. A flash mob doing the spinning circle thing. But this, I think, is the next generation. Forget about the iPhone zoom feature, right? Using 2 fingers to zoom in and stuff like that. That's a battleground for dinosaurs to fight. That's really a thing of the past. This is the future. Okay, because this is visual based. There's no screen on your device, which means if you're would you want to type your 7-page English paper on a screen like this?
No.
What if I tell you this screen is actually 1080p? Would that help? No. Why wouldn't that help? I mean, 1080p is cool.
Still small.
It is still small, and it doesn't, it's still only taking up a very small angle out of my eyes. Okay. In other words, it's limited by the density of my, is it cone or rods?
I have no idea.
The cell, the retina cells, okay, it's still limited by that density. But with Google Glass, it can project, on, with a wider angle, and the cost is actually smaller, less than this. Why do you think a Google Glass would cost actually less compared to a phone?
Less hardware.
Less hardware, and also, think about the screen on that thing. The screen is tiny. Okay. Now they do have to put a lot of dots into a very small space. Do we have the technology to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Putting a lot of dots into a very small surface area. We have no problem doing that. The only problem is our eyes cannot see those tiny dots. But through optics, okay, they can project those dots at the right resolution as far as our eyes are concerned. Okay. Now 1080p to me is already pretty much as good as it gets. Okay, it could be my eyes are older. I just any higher resolution I cannot really see much additional benefit. In other words, if the Google Glass can project 1080p over about 75 degrees or so, as my visual field, I'll be set. I don't need any higher resolution than that. What about 3D stuff? It's automatic, isn't it? Because each eye gets its own projector. So getting 3D vision out of something like that is automatic. What about privacy? Someone standing over your shoulder to see what is your password or username.
Good luck with that.
They can't do it. Well, it depends on the projection system, okay? Because if it leaks to the outside, they can still kind of use a lens system to figure out what you're looking at. But for the most part, you have more privacy.
If it's wireless, someone somewhere can get data from it.
Yeah, but most things are already wireless. So it's not a whole lot more. In terms of the lack of privacy, I think it can still be
I
tethered.
mean, it does have a camera, so if someone gets access to that, they can basically see everything that you see.
Yep.
That'd be interesting.
Masking tape.
Do Skype with that.
Masking tape. You just have to peel the masking tape when you do want your camera to be open. But I think that will redefine user interfaces. What if you want to type something? Remember your 7-page English paper? What are you going to do?
Keyboard.
Think it.
Combine this with Kinect.
Like,
Instead of
actually,
one camera, it has two. Okay, but now, if it has two cameras, through processing, they can actually see a 3D thing. So now it can project a virtual keyboard into your visual field, where you can still see your hand, but it has the virtual keyboard superimposed on top of that. Okay, now when you type, the Kinect mechanism, it doesn't have to be the same as a Kinect. It's just basically a 3D input device. It can sense the location of your finger and compare that to the projected location of the keys, and therefore, you'll be able to type.
Not much different from touchscreens now.
No, not much different.
Just
Why
resistance.
don't we just go straight, low impact, low work, and just say we're going to dictate it?
But that's that's going to be you can have more interference with people around you when you're dictating.
What if voice recognition? I mean, we're talking about something that, where voice recognition software could be close to as perfect as it ever is going to get. So
That would be good for people who have a speech impediment or people who have disabilities, because now they can express themselves just as well as the next person. And I think more people would start to grunt, because as soon as they know they don't have to speak clearly, and the computer would actually differentiate a versus a and they can actually write out an English paper that way. We'll just be grunting because talking actually takes effort. Okay, you have to control your lips, your tongue, all the coordination, right? But grunting is a whole lot easier if the computer can interpret your grunts, correctly and accurately, and you can still express everything that you want to express. We don't need language anymore, because the computer will understand the concepts. So you can just grow up any way you want, speak, grunt, scream, or what. use whatever way you want, as long as the computer is capable to grow with you as you get older and you want to express more. You'll be fine. We have universal translator.
Yeah. Yell, I won't put it.
It's already doing that. They had a video where a girl walked up and said something. I don't know if it was in like French or Latin or something, and it translated it for him. He was like,
Including that.
Yeah, he had to respond back. He was like, okay, that makes more sense.
Yep. So we are looking at an interesting future. You guys are lucky because you live longer than I am, so you will get to enjoy more of this technology.
You'll just be like an old grandpa by the time.
But I'll have all the implants. I'll have all the beta version of implants. Yeah. The prototypes.
A floating head in some gel.
Yep. All right. I'll see you guys on next Tuesday. I think this is how the class should be taught.
You think so? We digress a lot. So much digression.
It's entertaining and informative.